I hereby now invite Dr. Sanmuga Priya Ji, who's going to talk on the NT scan and anomaly screening. Dr. Sanmuganand Priya Ji, whom we fondly call as Dr. Priya, is an MBBS DNB radiology diagnosis and a scholar MD in gynecology. She did her undergraduation from the Stanley Medical College, Chennai in Tamil Nadu, and her PG from the National Board of Examinations. Her experience has been vast, and especially at Sri Manakula Vinayagar Medical College in Pondicherry, at Life Care Diagnostic Center in Andheri, and an Akshar Diagnostic Center. In fact, her training for mammography at the Jankaria Imaging Mumbai under Dr. Bijal Jankaria has given her a lot of insight into the various aspects. And her interest has always been in women's imaging, including mammography, pregnancy scan, and her expertise is in doing the NT scan. I hereby now request Dr. Shanmugha Priya to please come and address this entire gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for the introduction. So my topic is nuchal translucency and early anomaly scan. It's generally called as 11 to 14 week scan. So as a radiologist, our role in prenatal screening starts with NT scanning. So that is called 11 to 14 week scan or dating scan. So scanning can be divided into NT and early anomaly scan. If we do NT, we are not only measuring the NT, we also look for the heart rate, nasal bone, ductus venosus, and tricuspid regurgitation. Then in recent days, we are not only evaluating the NT, we are also doing early anomaly scan. That is particularly done at 12 to 14 weeks of gestation. This is very particular because at 11 to 12 weeks, it's very difficult to visualize the organs, fetal organs. So it's always better to do the early anomaly scan between 12 to 14 weeks. So if while doing the early anomaly scan, we can pick up structural abnormalities. So along with that, we also do uterine artery PI. So by doing uterine artery Doppler, we can also detect the preeclampsia. So it's a marker of preeclampsia. So coming to NT scan proper. So it's nothing but it's a soft marker from chromosomal abnormality. It's a very effective marker of trisomy 21. It's not only effective marker for trisomy 21, it's also effective marker of other aneuploidies like trisomy 18, 13, and other non-chromosomal abnormality and structural abnormalities like diaphragmatic hernia and so on. So even skeletal dysplasia. So the detection rate is 80% for trisomy 21 with the NT alone, with the increased NT alone. So as this is a screening test. The name itself implies all the pregnant women should be screened for NT. So by increased NT, we are telling the fetus has increased NT. We are not confirming anything. We are saying that fetus has a increased risk for that particular abnormality or chromosome. So this has to be explained to the pregnant woman. So what I do generally in my 10 years of ultrasound, before doing the scan, just explain everything to the pregnant lady. That is one main thing, because NT scan itself takes time. If we are combining with early anomaly scan, we have to explain everything, like I will take time, so on, so everything. If we have that good communication with the pregnant lady, she will cooperate with us very nicely. That is the first point. If she communicates with us properly, if we tell anything, she will cooperate with us. She will wait for whole day also to complete the scan. So that is one point. And so why we are doing NT? So the NT, increased NT, not simple NT, the increased NT is associated with many conditions like aneuploidy, like I said, trisomies, Turner syndrome, triploidies, in congenital heart disease. In that, septal defect is more common condition that is associated with increased NT. Apart from that, we can detect the diaphragmatic hernias, other rare syndromes, omphalocele, skeletal dysplasia. Even intrauterine infections are associated with it. Even fetal demise are associated with increased NT. So increased NT is the early presenting feature of the broad fetal abnormalities. So that is why we are doing increased NT. If we look at the history of nuchal translucency, it's actually from 1866 to 1990s. It's evolved as a effective screening tool. So what is NT? It's nothing but a normal subcutaneous fluid filled space at the nape of the neck at 11 to 14 weeks of gestation. So this picture I took from the Fetal Medicine Foundation website. Without Fetal Medicine Foundation, we all know they only give the guidelines how to do the scan, the techniques, all the nomograms. So with from this website, I took this picture. So this is the fluid collection we are talking about, and we are going to measure this thickness only, the vertical thickness of this fluid collection. So this is the nuchal translucency. So if anyone want to read about the fetal medicine or anything related to 11 to 14 weeks, you can go here and search. So when to do the scan? So the timing is more important. We generally say 11 to 14 weeks, but ideally it's 11 to 13 weeks plus 6 days. But the more than the weeks, the CRL is important. CRL measurement is important. So the CRL should be 45 to 84 millimeter. So that is important. So along with NT, we have to measure the heart rate, because in few chromosomal conditions, the heart rate is very high or very low. So we can interpret that also. So nasal bone, ductus venosus, and tricuspid regurgitation, everything will be evaluated along with that NT evaluation. So coming to early anomaly, as I told you, it has to be done between 12 to 14 weeks for the better evaluation. If we do at 11 weeks, it's very difficult to see the structures clearly. Even other physiological herniation, umbilical hernia can be misdiagnosed, it result in positive, false positive result. It gives a false positive result. So always do after 12 weeks. So how to do NT scan? That itself a technique. Actually, we can do transabdominally or transvaginally. I prefer transabdominal. You can do whichever way you like it. So as per the Fetal Medicine Foundation, the guidelines are the fetus should be in a mid-sagittal position. And the neck should be in the neutral position. We should zoom the image in such a way only the head and the upper thorax should be included in the image. We have to differentiate the amnion from the actual nuchal translucency. We should not consider that amnion as an increase in nuchal thickness. So these are the criteria. And another thing is we have to measure the maximum lucency. Maximum lucency has to be measured, and the caliper placement is also very important. And more than one measurement has to be taken, and the maximum measurement has to be calculated for the assessing the risk. And sometimes we can see umbilical cord around the neck that interferes with the NT evaluation. In that case, we can wait for some time to remove. After the fetal movement, it might disappear, move out of that neck region. Otherwise, we can take the NT measurement above and below the level of nuchal cord, and average of both the measurements are used. So this is the image I was talking about. This is also from Fetal Medicine Foundation. I used because of the proper demonstration. So this is a very good image for the NT evaluation. The fetus in mid-sagittal position, because why I'm saying, I could see the nasal bone, mandible, and the chin. No other bone in between these two structures. So mid-sagittal section is fine. The zoom is also adequate because I'm seeing only the head and upper part of thorax. Very good. And the fetus is in neutral position. How the head is in line with the thorax, and I could see some free space between the neck and between the head and the thorax. So this is the space we are going to measure. This is called nuchal translucency, and this line, hyperechoic line, is the amnion. So while measuring, we should not take this measurement. We should take only this measurement. This can be how we differentiate this amniotic membrane from the nuchal membrane. We can wait for the baby to bounce. When it bounces, we can definitely clearly see the amniotic membrane separate from the nuchal membrane. So we have to take the maximum thickness, maximum vertical thickness. So cursor has to be placed on the line, horizontal line that defines the nuchal translucency. So take multiple measurements, multiple maximum thickness, and use the highest value. So this is the another image showing the increased nuchal translucency value. So coming to the interpretation part, how do we interpret? There is no fixed value for nuchal translucency. We always use nomogram. The increased NT increases with increasing gestational age. So we have to use gestational age related cutoff, matlab CRL dependent cutoff. So we can go to Fetal Medicine Foundation or perinatology site to check for the nomogram, or we can, that is on calculation page is there. If we put a CRL and the corresponding NT, it calculates the percentile. So any value above 95th percentile is considered as increased NT, matlab significant. So for 95th, for CRL of 45 mm, the 95th percentile value is 21 mm. So for the 84 millimeter CRL, the 95th cutoff is 2.7 mm. So there is no fixed value. If we consider, if we are seeing a baby at when the CRL is 45 mm, if we measure, if the NT measurement is coming 2.7 mm, we should not consider it as a normal, but it is above 95th percentile for that CRL, for that gestational age. So it is increased, it should be considered as an increased NT. So the risk increases with increasing NT. Suppose if the fetus is having 3 mm NT thickness at 84 mm, and another baby is having 6 mm NT for that same CRL measurement, the 6 mm nuchal thickness is more increased risk compared to the 3 mm. So that is what it means. So if it is associated with other findings like nasal bone hypoplasia or any ductus venosus abnormality, the risk is increased. So this slide shows the deduction rate of the different screening test. If we take this NT and maternal age alone, the reduction rate is 70 to 80%. But if we combine age, NT, nasal bone, and do a marker, the deduction rate is 95%. So we finished nasal and nuchal translucency. So in the same section, we are going to evaluate the nasal bone. If we come a little bit down, we can evaluate the tricuspid regurgitation and ductus venosus. So coming to the nasal bone, this is also a soft marker. This has to be evaluated in the same gestational period. It is evaluated in the same mid-sagittal plane that fulfills all the criteria like NT. The only thing is the probe should be parallel to the nose. Otherwise, we can miss and falsely we can give it as a absent nasal bone. So we should take care of that as a radiologist. And generally, the nasal bone is seen as a echogenic line just below the skin. So it is always more echogenic than the overlying skin. This is the important point. We are actually looking at the echogenicity of the nasal bone, not the length, like in second trimester. In the first trimester, we are going to look at only the present or absent of the echogenicity. If it is echogenic, that's it. It's ossified, normal. So as I said, the transducer should be parallel to the nose, and the nasal bone and the overlying skin produces the so-called equal sign. I'll show you in the next slide. So the length of the nasal bone also increases with age. So again, if the non-visualization or non-ossification of the nasal bone indicates chromosomal abnormality, not only chromosomal abnormality, other syndromes associated with mid-phase hypoplasia. So suppose if we are having an increased NT plus absent nasal bone, So risk ratio is increased. The risk is increased for that particular baby. So this is the equal sign I was telling about. This is the overlying skin and this is the nasal bone. So we should not take this overlying skin as a nasal bone and should not report as a nasal bone present and echogenicity is normal. So always care should be taken to differentiate these two things. So if we come to this image, we don't see any equal sign. Only the overlying skin is there. The nasal bone is not visible. So non-ossification of the nasal bone. This is abnormal. Then we have to look for the ductus venosus. Same gestational age. We have to take the sagittal section of the abdomen. When the fetus is a little bit still, we have to evaluate for the ductus venosus. So generally, how to identify the ductus venosus? It connects the umbilical vein with the IVC just before IVC drains into the right atrium. So that is where, if we look there will be a brightest, it will be seen as a brightest signal as area of maximum aliasing. So there only we have to put the power Doppler. If we put the power Doppler, the sample volume gate should be 1 or less than 1. The angle should be 30. This is more important. Otherwise, the admixed flow will be seen. Admixed flow from the adjacent veins will be overlapped on the ductus venous flow. So this has to be taken care. And we generally, the ductus venosus produces 3 waves, SDA. So the sweep speed should be high to differentiate these waves. Any abnormality is considered when the A wave is absent or reversed. Again, it's associated with fetal aneuploidy, cardiac defects, preeclampsia, and other adverse pregnancy outcomes. So this is the normal ductus. This is the ductus vein connecting the umbilical vein with the IVC. It will be seen as a brightest structures, and this is the normal ductus venosus waveform. This is called as a M type or a M alphabet M, like. So this is what I was talking about. If we don't keep the power gate sample volume gate size low or less than 1 millimeter, we'll get additional flows from the adjacent vessel. So we should be taking care of this, and we should not take this as a reversal of A wave. That is one thing we should take care of. So this picture shows the reversal of A wave. This is significantly, this is important because we don't see any other added flow. This shows only the ductus venous flow and the reversal of A wave. So it's a marker of aneuploidy or a cardiac defect. If we see increased NT with tricuspid, with the reversal of A wave, we should increase the suspicion, and the risk is also increased. So coming to tricuspid regurgitation, for this we have to take a zoomed up view of a fetal heart, especially the apical 4-chamber view. In this 11 to 14 weeks, color Doppler is of no useful to detect the regurgitation. So we have to depend on the power Doppler. In this case, the power Doppler should be power Doppler volume gate size should be more than in the range of 2 to 3 mm. So that has to be kept across the tricuspid valve to detect the tricuspid regurgitation. So again, any velocity going beyond 60 centimeter per second is abnormal. That is indicative of regurgitation, irrespective of whether it's a tricuspid wave pattern or aorta adjacent pulmonary artery is giving the signal. If we see any velocity going beyond 60 centimeter per second, it's nothing but tricuspid regurgitation. We can simply say that. So it is associated with aneuploidy and cardiac defects. So this is a normal tricuspid valve wave pattern on power Doppler, and this is the reflux. This is definitely more than 180 centimeter per second. So this is tricuspid regurgitation. So with this, we concluded the NT evaluation. So NT, we include nasal bone, tricuspid regurgitation, heart rate, and ductus venosus evaluation. So nowadays, we are doing the early anomaly scan that generally done at 12 to 14 weeks. For this, for the interpretation of the early anomaly scan, we should know a little bit of embryology. That is important. So if we coming to head, by 11 weeks, the frontal and parietal bones are seen ossified. So we can easily evaluate the acrania and encephaly. Even we can rule out encephalocele. If we find any protruding structures with a defect in the cranial vault, we can diagnose. If we see midline falx cerebri, definitely we see by 12 weeks. So if we see this, we can easily rule out holoprosencephaly. And recent thing is intracranial translucency. This is very, very important. And with this, we can rule out many syndromes and many spinal conditions like open spina bifida, Ardnal-Chiari malformation, and so on. I will tell you about that. So as I told you, by looking at the ossified skull vault, we can rule out acrania, lethal anomalies, acrania and encephaly, holoprosencephaly, all those things. So this is the normal 12 to 14 week scan of a fetus showing a cranial vault. This is normal. We can see the midline falx cerebri. We are ruling out holoprosencephaly. Nothing, one section we can say for sure. So this picture showing acranium. Again, this picture shows holoprosencephaly. Yes, this picture shows the intracranial lucency. If we carefully look into the picture, we can see lots of lucencies within. So this is the developing midbrain, and this is the brainstem. This long hypoechoic area is the brainstem, and this area is the fourth ventricle, and this is the choroid plexus within the fourth ventricle, and this part is the cerebellum, and this is the cisterna magna. So this is the nuchal translucency we are going to measure. So in the same single NT section, this is the NT section we generally use to measure the nuchal translucency. In the same section, we can evaluate the nasal bone also, NT also, and the intracranial pathology also. This is the midline falx. So if we find any changes in this translucency, we can go down and look for the open spina bifida, and we can do the axial sections of the brain to rule out Ardnal-Chiari or other malformities, other abnormalities. So coming to the spine. So at 7 weeks, generally the spine ossification starts from the mid-thorax level and goes caudally and cranially. So spina bifida can be detected by the indirect signs that I told you, like a banana cerebellum or the lemon-shaped head, or by the direct sign like a defect in the spine itself, the direct visualization of the bone defect. So all those things can be picked up in the 12 to 14 week scan itself. So we have to evaluate we have to see the skull, then brain, intracranial lucency, come to the spine region. If we see any defect or any changes in the intracranial lucencies, we have to suspect spina bifida. So this is the ultrasound image showing a lemon-shaped head. There's an indentation or scalloping on the both frontal bones. This is because of the open spina bifida. So this gives indirect clues. So that we can go down and see for the spina bifida defect or spinal defect. Coming to the abdominal wall, this is another important area. So NT itself is associated with diaphragmatic hernia. So by coming down to the abdominal wall, we can see the diaphragm also. If it is intact, we can rule out diaphragmatic hernia, and by looking at the anterior abdominal wall, we can rule out the abdominal wall herniation like omphalocele or gastroschisis. So this is the normal fetus at a 12 to 14 week gestation. I'm just seeing the cord attachment. By looking at the cord attachment itself, I can say there is no abdominal wall hernia and the anterior abdominal wall is intact. That's it. Job is done. So generally, between 7 to 12 weeks of age, this is what embryology plays a role. 7 to 12 weeks, the midgut herniation into the umbilical cord is a normal embryology. So by 12 weeks, the normal midgut return to the abdominal cavity. So we should evaluate abdominal wall after 12 weeks. That is very important. And another thing is, before 12 weeks, we should not diagnose or give in our reporting like a fetus is having abdominal wall hernia. So again, after 12 weeks only we can see the abdominal wall defect. So the small difference between the omphalocele and gastroschisis is, in this gastroschisis, a defect is lateral to the cord attachment. In omphalocele, we see intra-abdominal content herniated into the herniated outside. The cord is attached on top of the hernia sac. That is the difference between omphalocele and gastroschisis. We can easily identify the abnormality at 12 to 14 weeks. Yeah, one more thing is, before 12 weeks, if the hernial mass or the herniated mass is more than 7 mm and it contains liver or any other intra-abdominal organs like stomach, it is very much significant. It is not physiological hernia. Physiological hernia means only the midgut bowel will be seen inside the hernial sac. If we see anything other than midgut like a liver or intra-abdominal organs, we should consider it as a abdominal wall defect irrespective of the gestational age. Coming to urinary tract, by 12 to 13 weeks, we see urinary bladder. By looking at the urinary bladder, we can rule out is there any mehacystis or anything else. Any abnormal bladder outlet obstruction is there, we can evaluate that. In the first trimester, the amniotic fluid abnormality is not dependent on the fetal urination. It's mainly from the yolk sac and placenta and fetus. Fetus in the sense translate from the fetus. So after 16 weeks only, the amniotic fluid volume is depends on the fetal urination. So by looking at the amniotic fluid volume, we cannot assess the urinary tract abnormality in the 12 to 14 weeks gestation. Yeah, coming to kidney, we see or not see at 12 to 14 weeks, depending on the abnormality, kidney abnormalities, because polycystic kidneys cannot be diagnosed at this stage. That develops later on. But bilateral renal agenesis, multicystic kidney disease can be diagnosed at this 12 to 14 weeks. So it is always 12 to 14 weeks anomalies can give some clue, can detect the lethal abnormalities, but it's always better to do later 18 to 20 weeks scan. Coming to skeleton, so generally at 18 to 9 weeks on transvaginal scan, we can see a limb buds. Limb buds are visible. By 11 weeks, we can see the distal phalanges of the fingers. Even we can by 12 weeks, we can see all the 3 segments of the 4 limbs. Even we can evaluate the limb foot angle. Limb foot angle also can be evaluated. So by 12 weeks, we can see all the 3 segments of the 4 limbs. We should be see all the limb movements, and all the long bones should be ossified. So we can measure the length also by 12 to 14 week stage. We can detect the skeletal dysplasia by looking at the bone length, ossification, and the movement. By in lethal dysplasia, skeletal dysplasias, there will be bone shortening by 11 weeks, disproportionate between the body and the limb. Lack of mineralization and movement also considered as a marker for lethal skeletal dysplasia. Yeah, coming to uterine artery Doppler, this is the marker of preeclampsia. So with the proper Doppler setting, with proper angle correction, we have to take the waveform of uterine artery. We have to take both the uterine artery waveform and we have to take the mean PI. That should be more than 95th percentile. That is considered abnormal. So like any other marker, we have to use nomogram for the interpretation. CRL, gestational age related values has to be used to tell whether it is increased or normal, within the normal limits. And it's if we combine the uterine artery PI with mean arterial pressure of mother and serum biochemistry, like the previous speaker told, the sensitivity is increased for the preeclampsia in the first trimester. Okay, so this is just for the conclusion sake, because with nuchal translucency, we can evaluate the chorionicity also. In the later pregnancy, suppose in the second and third trimester, it's difficult to diagnose or detect the chorionicity. So it's better to always tell about the chorionicity in the 11 to 14 week scan itself. That gives an idea. And another thing is, in twin or multiple gestation, only the NT is the marker to tell whether the fetus is having chromosomal abnormality or any other abnormality. In twin pregnancy or multiple gestation, dual marker doesn't have much role. Right? So always be careful with the chorionicity and nuchal translucency in multiple pregnancies. So if this is if combined increased NT and the dual marker combined, this slide is actually from the Fetal Medicine Foundation. If the result is 1 in 50, it is considered as high risk. So karyotyping is the indication. We have to do chorionic villus sampling for the diagnosis. If the result is 1 in 1000, is considered as low risk. We need not to do anything, just do anomaly scan at 18 to 20 weeks. Anything between 50 and 1000 is considered as intermediate abnormality, intermediate risk. So in that case, we have to assess the new marker. This is the idea. Actually, if we see increased NT, look for cardiac abnormality or do early anomaly scan. If that is normal, we can do, this is a chorionic villus sampling. If the NT is increased, we have to do chorion CVS or early anomaly scan. If both are normal, we can do fetal echocardiography. If that is also normal, we can do anomaly scan later at 18 to 20 week scan. If that is also normal, we can assure the patient that baby is normal. The probability of delivering a baby with abnormality is same as general population. If the 20 week scan, the increased NT can persist as a thick nuchal fold. In that case, we can think of infection or any other rare syndrome, or 10% possibility is there for the fetus to develop fetal hydrops onto the perinatal date. So everything has to be explained to the pregnant woman and to the relatives. That is more important. So conclusion is 11 to 14 weeks scan is very useful screening test. It detects wide range of abnormalities, fetal abnormalities, including chromosomal, non-chromosomal, and structural abnormalities, even preeclampsia, intrauterine infections. Always the above 95th percentile is considered as increased NT. Always use CRL related cutoff to for the interpretation. If the NT is increased, look for additional markers. If we see any additional markers are absent, nasal bone or a reversal in the ductus venosus or tricuspid regurgitation, again the risk increases. If we don't see anything, that is fine. We can do the early anomaly scan to rule out structural abnormality. If structural abnormalities are present, again the risk increases. If we don't see any structural abnormality, do late anomaly scan. As I told earlier, many abnormalities are developed later in the later period. Suppose only NT is increased, all other findings are normal, then NT itself is an effective marker for chromosomal abnormality, especially trisomy 21 with a reduction rate of 80%. So we have to tell the pregnant lady, we are saying only the risk is increased. It's only a screening test, not a diagnostic test. If, for example, if the result comes as 1 in 200, we are saying only one baby out of 200 babies going to be affected with that particular abnormality. The remaining 199 will be normal. So we have to explain everything to the pregnant mother and assure her. So that is the job. It is always important to communicate with the pregnant women. As a radiologist, generally after the scan, either the pregnant woman or the relatives will ask us, how is the fetus, how is the baby, is everything normal? So always before the start of the scan, tell the pregnant lady what we are going to do. Always communication is important. What we are going to see, what we are, by giving some finding, what we are implying, what we are indicating. So we have to explain everything. If possible, try to get the follow-up. That is what I was taught by Dr. Bhupati Vijayaraghavan. So always communicate with the patient and give proper information to the patient. If possible, do the counseling. That's it. With this slide, I'm concluding my topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shanmuga Priya, for the insight, for your area of expertise, and for sharing all those different parameters and the slides and enlightening all of us